Yeah, what's good, people? So today I want to show you guys how to rebuild the song template that I had set up for Reason 6 and 6.5. If you haven't seen that and you want to know a little bit more, or you're not in Reason 7 yet, check it out here. Otherwise, let's open up the audio section and select channel out 1 and 2 here. So that shows up in our master VU meter here. Next, we're going to go down to the mastering section and change that to 4-band compression. Close that down. Make sure it stays bypassed until you're done and ready to master. Next, I want to change this over to peak. I just like the way the levels react better there. And I'm going to open up this master spectrum analyzer. Up here in my bus compression, I'm going to raise the threshold a little bit, bring down the release a touch, and bring down the gain a little bit, and make sure that's still turned off until I'm done and ready to master. Next, I want to come up to my tool window, select the tools. I'm going to put on a value of 1/16 and turn on quantize grid recording. And I can also do that down here in the transport if I want. I want to activate the loop mode. Keep that on 9 bars. I'm going to magnify that in so I can see the whole loop as soon as I start recording. Let me start my tempo at 130 because that's where I tend to start my songs. I'm going to turn on my click and my pre-roll. And then make sure to begin with, my snap is set to full bar. That's just my preference. Okay, so let's get this stuff out of the way for now and we'll work in the rack. I want to right click on the mastering section and build a flower loudness audio meter. If you don't have this plugin, don't worry about it. You don't need this at all. It just really helps my workflow. And it's probably the best $20 I've spent in as far as refills goes. I'm going to go from the master output into that flower meter, and then from the output back into that channel 1 that we selected before to read out on this VU meter. Next, I want to right click on that, and I'm going to create an effect. This one's going to be PEF's mid-side processing unit. If you don't have this from the first tutorial, go and download it. I'll leave the link in the description. I'm going to call that mid-side and make sure it's routed up right from the master out there into my main input. Let's close that down and make sure it's bypassed until I'm ready to master. And now I'm going to create a soft tube saturation knob. I'm going to label it final saturation. Let's call it final tape. And I'm going to boost that up a little bit in the mid-range and bypass that as well. Now, if you don't have this rack extension, all you have to do is create a Scream 4 distortion, put it over on the tape, move your speed all the way up, and adjust your compression based on the song. But the soft tube saturation knob is a whole lot easier and a little bit nicer of a sound, so I go with that. Next, let's create an equalizer. Close that down and bypass it, and let's call it the final EQ. And lastly, we're going to create an M-class maximizer. Call that our final limit. And we will make sure everything's routed correctly. And we'll bypass that. Set that 4 millisecond look ahead. And that's our mastering chain. Everything's bypassed until you're ready to finalize your song. And all of your output is going to be read by this spectrum analyzer if it's set to the mastering section. Next, I want to create an instrument. I'm going to make a blank combinator. If you've watched any of my tutorials, you know exactly what this is. It's really just a combinator with a line mixer inside of it. I'm going to call it Send Effects. And you'll see what I'm about to do with this. Let's open it up. Show you the line mixer inside of it. Make sure that's routed into my channel there. And below that, I want to create, first off, an M-class compressor. an advanced reverb, and then another, a digital reverb, RV7, a basic delay unit, an echo machine, and then that'll fill up our 6 slots. So on the compressor, I'm going to boost the input gain a little, bring down the threshold, boost the ratio, down with the attack and up with the release, and then up a little bit with the output gain. Let's call that my parallel compression, if I can spell it. And then the next one, I'm going to browse to find my all first plate. I'm going to call that plate. My third one is going to be all first room. There we go. Call that room. Next, I want to put this one on Hall 2, bring the size down and the decay down just slightly, and I'm going to call that my Hall. This one, I'm just going to rename the 3/16 delay and leave all my settings the same. And the echo, I'm going to leave alone and call that my echo. Now what we're going to do is bring the output of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 into this line mixer. And then from my send effects up here in the mastering section, 1 goes into the compressor, 2 goes into the plate reverb, 3 goes into the room reverb, 4 into the Hall, 5 into the delay, and 6 goes into the echo. Okay, let's close that down. And I'm going to come up to my mixer window. I'm going to name my first one parallel compression. The second plate. The third room. The fourth Hall. The fifth 3/16 delay. And the 6th we'll call echo. And then I'm going to make custom 1 and custom 2. And we'll go build those right now. Close down that mixer window so we have some space. And below this, I'm going to create another instrument. Blank combinator again. If you don't have this patch, you should really save it out. I use it every time I start an instrument, and it saves some time. And I'm going to duplicate that one. I'm going to call this Custom Effects 2, and this one is going to be Custom Effects 1. And all that is a line mixer inside, so you can build a whole lot of effects into each one of these units. So let's say I just put a pulverizer in there, whatever. Alright, let's delete that and leave it blank. So if we close these all down and clean it up a little bit, let's open up the mixer channels and get it all routed up. So if I flip this around, oh, looks like I needed the combinators open, not the mix channels. And I'm going to come from Send Effects Output 7 into the input of Custom Effects 1. And from out number 8 into Custom Effects 2. So the reason I did it this way is if I shift click all these mixer channels, right click on them, route to a new output bus, it's going to send them all out to this channel here. And I'm going to call this my send effects. So basically, if I clean this up a little bit again, all 3 of these, actually all 6 of these, and then your custom effects are all going to be routed from the send effects out into this mixer channel. And you can tell it's a stem group by this red fader here and also this red light on the back. That's how Reason 7's decided to notify you of a stem mixer channel or a bus output. So here I'm going to change it for my preference to light blue so that all my stem mix channels stand out from the rest of the mixer. Then I'm going to come over to my next rack and create a new audio track, change the color of that, and call it Mic In 1. I'm going to duplicate that and call this one Mic In 2. And if I shift clicked on both of those, right click, route to a new output bus. I'm going to change the color to match my send effects, and I'm going to call this my vocal stem. Let's drag it over here and move it above the send effects. So now I'm starting to build my submixer. Over here, I'm going to drag my send effects out to the left and my vocal stem out to the left, just so my stem mixer stays visually separate from all the rest of the channels in my song. Okay, that all looks good. So let's get this mixer window out of our way a little bit and we'll focus back on the rack. I'm going to come to the far right here, right click, create a new instrument. And I want to choose my blank Kong combinator. Oh, and that came in with an audio channel, so let me redo that. I wanted to hold shift when I created that, so hold shift, create new instrument, blank Kong combinator. If you haven't built this patch, check out the link here and in the description. We're going to call that our drum kit. And we'll open it up. This might look familiar to anybody who's done this before. If not, go check out the other tutorial and then come back to us. We're going to unroute all this mixer and we're going to route it to the SSL separately now. So let's undo everything there, flip it around. I can also get rid of all these effects and the mixer device. So delete them out. So now all I have is my EQ chain. And I can actually get rid of this summing kick. And just below that, let's create a new mixer channel. Open it up. And I'm going to put a Spider Audio merger splitter in there. Call it my merger. And then I'm going to duplicate that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times. I'm going to call my first one kicks. My second one's going to be called snares. The third one will be claps. Next is hats. Then cymbals. Toms. And percussion. Okay. So now if we come up into the EQ section of the drum machine, let's open up the kicks. I'm going to drag my output of each of those into the kicks channel merger. And then we'll close everything down. Now I want all of my snare elements. I'm going to clean this up a little bit, move them together. So now we have our rim shot. Oh, sorry, let's close down the kicks, open up the snares channel. Rim shot gets merged in. Snare 1 merged in. Snare 2 into the merger. Close that down, open up our claps. We'll clean up this EQ section. Find our claps in here. I'll route that out to this channel, and there's only one of those, so let's close it down. Next I want to find all my hi-hats. And I'm just going to organize these a little bit from last time. Okay, so I got my open hat, my loose hat, and my tight hat. And we're going to route each of those into the hats channel merger. Close it down. Open up the symbols, and let's do the same thing. There's my crash and my ride. Sorry. And I'm also going to route my extra open pad to be a second crash. So let's just make sure pad 15 here, we'll call it crash 2. And I'm going to make sure that's panned to come out of channel 16. Okay, those ones are flip-flopped, but it's all right, it'll still work. 15 and 16 output. We'll close that back down. And now, let's duplicate that and we'll call it crash 2. And the input of that goes to here. The output goes back into the merger. Next up is the toms. Now let's go with the high tom into the merger, the mid tom, the low tom, and the floor tom. So all those are merged together. Clean it up and close this down. And now our drum pads are all routed up to their own mini sub mixer. Clean it up. Next I want to come to my percussion section, and below that I'm going to hold shift and create a new instrument. Go to my custom patches, the Instashaker. If you haven't checked out this patch, go to this tutorial here. I'll also put the link in the description. I'm going to call that my Instashakers. Open this up. I want to copy loop to track and make sure this is enabled is off. I'll close it down. And let me come into my sequencer window. You can see how this is already routed out to my track here. All I want to do is turn this one off until I'm ready to use it. So all I do is turn it on if I want some shakers. And then let's route this one into the percussion merger. Next, I want to go into each of these channels and route the merger's output into the mixer channel input. So we get a signal. Just like that. We'll open up the claps, the merger output into the input. Hats, merger out, mix channel in. Let's close these down. Same with the cymbals, merger out, channel in. And the toms. And lastly, the percussion. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go in here. I'm going to shift click and select all these channels here, route to a new output bus, and call that my drum stem. I'll then change its color to match the rest of my stem mixer, and let's move it over into that section. I'll get them in order, and then the same in the mixer window to drag them over to the left. Okay, next let's do a little bit of cleaning up in here. All these tracks are useless. Okay, and then also this Instashakers, the combinator channel is useless. All I need is the actual Rex track here. And now all of these, I'm going to color match them to ochre just for preference. And the same with the sequencer channels. And these clips here. Next, in my sequencer on the drum rack, I'm going to create a new lane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The first one, double click. I'm going to call that kicks. My second one, snares. My third will be called claps. The fourth one I call straight hats for just my straight like 8th beats or 16th notes. My next one I call funk hats, and that's for the more intricate patterns, so I can keep those two things separate. Next, I'm going to put in my cymbals. And lastly, go my toms. So now this whole section is ready to record straight out the box as soon as you open this thing up, and you have all your channels separated. If you want, you can create a little section here, and let's just create it, go across all the pads and across the whole loop. So I just open up, if you like to draw in your stuff instead of playing it, those regions are already made for you too. So we're just trying to cut seconds off, and they add up to hours at the end of the day. So let's move that sequencer out of the way and over to the right in my rack window. I'm going to create a new instrument. I'm just going to put in a simple sub bass. You can put in whatever you want in here for a bass. I like to color those. Let's do asparagus. I'm going to call that my sub bass. And then let's duplicate it. I'm going to pick a grittier bass to go right on top of that sub. And then we'll call that our top bass. Shift click and route those two into a new output bus. We're going to color this light blue to match the others and call this the bass stem. Again, let's move it over into this section, and the same in the mixer window. So everything's nice and organized. So the rest of this is going to be kind of the same, just building instrument sections. You can skip along to the end if you don't want to follow along. But next up, I'm going to create a new rack with a blank combinator. Let's make this one a wheat color, and I'm going to call it my piano. Make another blank combinator. Call this one. Let's change it to orange. Let's change it to a slate blue. Looks good. And we'll call this my guitar. Okay, I want to shift click on both of those. Route them to a new output bus. Change that to light blue. And I'm going to call this my naturals. Move it over. In the mixer window. And I forgot, below my basses, I like to add an instrument that is this MPC module that I created, the Nurse Rex MPC. check out this tutorial if you haven't seen how to create that. I'm going to call that my MPC chops. I'm going to leave that and route it to its own separate bus just so everything gets organized in the stem mixer. Let's label that sample stem. And make it light blue. Sample stem. And then we'll move that over with the others. And in the mixer window as well. Alright, we're almost done here. Next, let's make a couple blank combinators. I'm going to make them yellow. Call this one my brass. I'm going to duplicate it. Call this one my strings. If I can spell it. Shift click, route to a new output bus. Orchestral stem. Make that light blue. And move it over. Next, we're going to build a synth stem. If you guys want to just do this and then skip along a few minutes in the video, and I'll show you how to wrap this all up. But if you want to follow along with me, please do. So lastly, we're going to create our synthesizer stem. I'm going to create a blank Thor combinator. Let me change this to a different color. And then I want to make these ones orange. So let's call this my synth pad. I'm going to duplicate it twice. Call this my synth lead. And I will call the last one my synth buildup. And then we're going to route all three of those to their own stem mixer channel, new output bus. Light blue. Call it my synth stem. And over in the mixer window, and over in the rack window. Okay, so now that we have all these organized how we want them, color coded, our basic template is pretty much built. There's just a couple little cleanup things. So now that we have this mini mixer built out, once you're in your mix down mode, you can, mute all the send effects at once or reduce them all. And then you have one fader control over a lot of different groups of instruments, which really helps when you're in your final mix down. So I want to come from my send effects all the way up to my bass stem, shift click, and route all of those to a new output bus. And this one is going to be called All Music stem. So basically, if I drag this up, let's put it right below the drums. So my final three outputs, I'll organize it up here, are going to be my vocal stem, my drum stem, and my all music stem. So those are my last three balance points in my final mix down. And the all music is just going to control everything but the drums and the vocals. So it's a really easy way to get a nice powerful balance. And one thing I noticed I forgot over here in my effects section is my sidechain compression unit. And check out the old tutorial to see how that works exactly. Let's call that sidechain matrix. And that doesn't need to be routed anywhere, but let's make sure that's on a 4/4 to start with. I have a couple other different patches built. So that's all set. Okay, so these are my 3 final outputs. Like I said before, it's kind of really easy to get your final balance that way, and you can see how everything else in the mixer is routed through the vocals, drums, or the all music channel. And now each one of these has their own separate visual analyzer and EQ. All you have to do is click that button up top or choose from the list down here, and you can access all of those. They're routed to the EQ section in here. But I think that's about it. If I wanted to add a new instrument, let's say I duplicate one of them, and we go down here, and we can see it's still routed to the synthesizer stem. So it's nice and easy. It's a lot easier than the old method where I had to reroute everything by hand. Or let's say I make a new instrument. All I have to do is right-click on it, route to, and then I will choose my synthesizer stem. So we can see in the mixer window it's routed to my synth stem, but if I wanted to, I could just easily change it to my drum stem. Simple as that. It's really sped up the workflow and the mixing process and the producing process even. But let's come down here and see what we got to do in our sequencer window. It looks like there's some color issues that aren't matching up, so let's change these basses to asparagus so they match my mixer. My MPC chops are right. My piano wants to be wheat. My guitar is going to be this light olive. My brass and strings want to be yellow. And my synthesizers want to be orange. And I forgot the middle one. So now when I record anything into here, my sequencer tracks are going to match my mixer window and my racks. Let's get rid of this sidechain compression track. I don't need that unless I want to automate a pattern switch for my sidechain at some point. But normally I don't do that. I'm going to focus my drums rack in the sequencer window because that's where I start off most of my tracks. And let's go through and make sure everything's how we want it to be. My basses are already pre-programmed. Sometimes I'm going to change some of these instruments. I might not have a brass section. I'll change that to something else. But this is a good starting point for me. You can customize it however you want to. Up here, if I select that mixer master channel, it's going to show up in my analyzer here. And then let's go up here and we're going to save this. If my window pops up, there it is. I'm going to call this J.Sci master template. And I'm going to call it V7 since it's only good for reason 7 and above. Now that that's saved out, I want to come up to my preferences. And right here where it says default song, empty rack, I'm going to choose template, select my browser folder, and let's find this one that we just saved. Select it. And all those are good. So let's close those down. Now, whenever you start up a new session, no, that's an old one. Let's start up a new session. And boom, everything we just did is in there automatically, and you can go to town. Sometimes I can write a song in an hour. It works for me. Let me know what you guys think about it. Subscribe and like for more videos, and I'll check you guys later. Peace.
It's just science.